Applause. Settlers broke my mama's ribs for being Chinese. She came to the mountain man and said, he answered, they'll pay for this. They had broken her ribs like splitting kindling, not with accident, but with grinning intent. Each blow had cracked bone and breath alike until she lay bent against the earth, lips bloodied, breath rattling shallow, as if every inhale might be the last. Her daughter's scream carried over the ridge, thin and sharp, a sound too desperate to belong to one so young. The men laughed. They called it justice. They called it cleansing. They called it what men always did when their cruelty needed a cloak. And then they rode off, leaving her broken, leaving her to freeze. The girl was 17, all wrists and ragged skirts, hair unpinned and cheeks streaked with mud. She knelt in the dirt beside her mother, trembling hands trying to brace the woman's side, afraid to touch too hard lest more pain spill from her already broken body. "Mama," she whispered, voice raw. "Please, please don't leave me." Her mother's face, pale as snow under the bruises, twitched in effort to open her eyes. She breathed shallow, ribs scraping inside like knives. No words came, only the weaves of survival's last threads. The girl did not wait for miracles. She heaved her mother onto a swayback mule, teeth gritted as the weight nearly toppled her small frame. Her own knees buckled in the mud, but she forced herself up again, one hand clutching reins, the other clinging to her mother's limp form to keep her from sliding. She staggered into the timberline with nothing but the mule's stumbling hooves to mark the trail behind them. Snow began to fall. Thin needles at first, then heavier flakes, slow and indifferent. The cold closed in with dusk. Every shadow carried menace. The girl kept moving, lungs burning, mind full of the sound of men's laughter echoing behind. They had said they would return to finish it. She believed them. She feared the dark more than the storm, for dark was where men found you. When the mule bulked at a rise of rock and ice, she slapped its flank with all the strength she had left. "Go," she hissed. It lurched forward, hooves scraping. Her mother moaned faintly, ribs grinding, and the sound speared the girl's chest worse than any cold. "Hold on," she begged, whispering as if words alone could keep a soul tethered. "I'll find someone. Anyone. Just don't go quiet on me." The wind rose. Pine branches clattered like bones above. Night thickened. She prayed, not to God. God had been silent when the settler swung fists and boots into her mother's side, but to the land itself, to some hidden spirit in the mountains that might have mercy. And then she saw it, a faint orange glow flickering through the trees. Not lightning, not star, fire. Her breath broke into sobs. She staggered faster, dragging the mule along a narrow deer path. Each step drove mud and snow into her shoes, numbing her toes until she couldn't tell where the ground ended, and she began. Her throat ached from whispering encouragements to her mother. Almost there, just a little further. Stay awake. The glow grew stronger. It bled out from a low-built log shelter pressed between rock and pine. Smoke spiraled from a chimney, dark against the pale sky. A figure crouched near the fire outside, splitting wood in slow, steady strokes. He was huge, shoulders bowed but broad, hair shagged long to his jaw, face hidden in the flicker of flame. She stumbled into the clearing, half dragging the mule. Her voice cracked in the cold. "Help us, please." The man stilled, axe hanging mid-swing. He looked up. The fire's light caught his eyes, pale and narrow like chips of mountain stone. His silence stretched until she thought her plea might freeze and fall unheard. Then he rose to his full height, taller than any man she'd seen, and stepped closer. Her knees gave way in the snow, exhaustion folding her in half. "They broke my mama's ribs," she gasped, pointing to the limp woman sagging on the mule for being Chinese. The words came raw, torn from her throat. The man's gaze flicked from the girl to the broken woman, then to the bruises on the girl's own wrists. The axe slipped from his hand and sank into the snow without a sound. His voice, when it came, was low and flat. A stone dragged across gravel. "They'll have to pay for that." The girl blinked through tears. For a moment, she thought she'd imagined the words, But then the man moved. Sudden swift, he lifted the mother from the mule as if she weighed no more than a child, cradling her with surprising care. She whimpered, ribs grinding, but he pressed a broad hand to her shoulder, steadying. Easy, he muttered. Then the night cracked open. Shouts carried through the trees, harsh and close. Male voices. The settlers had followed. The mountain man's eyes sharpened. He shifted the woman into the girl's arms long enough to wrench the axe free. Inside, he ordered, voice clipped, and nodded toward the cabin. The girl obeyed, staggering beneath her mother's weight, dragging her toward the shelter's door. She glanced back just long enough to see shadows spilling between the pines, figures on horseback, rifles glinting in the snow light. The first shot split the night. The mule screamed and bolted into the trees. The mountain man didn't flinch. He strode forward, axe gleaming, meeting the rider's head on. His size seemed to swell against the dark, a wall of muscle and intent. The girl heard curses, the crunch of hooves, the crack of wood as steel met flesh. She forced herself not to look again, not to let horror freeze her. She got the door open, pulled her mother inside, and lowered her gently onto a bearskin rug before the fire. Her hands shook so badly she could barely latch the door. Outside, the fight raged. Shouts, thuds, the screech of pain. Then silence cut sharp as a blade. She pressed her back to the door, clutching her mother's limp hand. Tears blurred her sight. Every second stretched taut. She feared the next knock would be a boot. The next breath her last. Then the latch lifted slow. She braced. The door swung inward. The mountain man filled the frame. Blood spattered across his shirt, axe hanging loose at his side. His breath steamed in the cold. His eyes swept past her to the woman lying by the fire. He knelt without a word, set the axe aside, and pressed calloused fingers to her mother's pulse. After a long, aching moment, he gave a single nod. She's alive. The girl's chest collapsed with relief. She crawled to her mother's side, pressing her forehead to her hand. The woman stirred faintly, breath rattling but steady. The man rose, towering above them, and pushed the door shut. He slid a heavy bar across it, sealing out the storm, sealing out the dead. Then he turned, face unreadable in the firelight, and for the first time she saw the lines carved deep around his eyes, the shadow of old grief sitting heavy in his features. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The girl looked at him. This stranger pulled from the mountain's marrow and felt a new fear take root, not of harm, but of what he might yet do on their behalf. The fire snapped, sending sparks up the chimney. Snow hissed against the roof. Her mother's shallow breathing filled the room. The man stood silent, shoulders heaving with the rhythm of a bear that had fought and survived. His hands, though smeared with blood, reached for a wool blanket. He draped it over the broken woman's body with unexpected gentleness. The girl whispered barely a thread of sound, "Thank you." His eyes flicked to her once, pale and distant, then away again. He pulled a chair close to the fire and sat with the axe laid across his knees, gaze fixed on the door as if daring the night to bring more. The girl clutched her mother's hand tighter, trembling, but no longer alone. And outside in the snow-black dark, the horses of the settlers lay still, and the storm carried their silence away. But the girl knew silence could not hold forever. The cabin smelled of pine smoke and damp wool, a smell that clung to the rafters and to the man who lived there. The fire snapped and settled into a steady burn, light trembling across rough hewn walls. The girl knelt beside her mother, smoothing damp hair from her brow. The woman's chest rose shallow, uneven. Each breath a oasis waiting to happen. Her face bore shadows of both pain and endurance, features tightened by years of enduring insult and labor. The mountain man said nothing. He set the axe against the wall, fetched a clay jug from the shelf, and poured water into a tin cup. He knelt with surprising slowness, and held it out to the girl. She blinked at him, hands shaking, before taking it. He dipped a cloth into the water and pressed it gently against the woman's swollen lips. She moaned faintly and swallowed. It was not much, but enough to prove life still clung stubbornly inside her. The girl's eyes filled again. "Thank you," she whispered. Though her voice broke in the saying, the man didn't answer. He rose, rummaged through a wooden chest, and returned with strips of cloth, a needle, and a bottle that smelled sharp enough to strip the lungs. "Whissy." He soaked the rags, then crouched at the woman's side. His scarred hands startlingly tender as they pressed along her ribs. She hissed and bucked weakly, but his voice rumbled low, steady, almost like a lull. "Breathe, easy." The girl clutched her mother's hand, knuckles white, watching as he bound her chest with strips of cloth. His hands moved with a memory of someone who had done this before, perhaps too many times. When he finished, he leaned back on his heels, wiped his hands against his trousers, and let out a long breath through his nose. "She'll live," he muttered. "If fever don't take her," the words cut, but they were truth, and the girl found she clung to them like rope in water. "What should I do?" she asked. "Keep her still, warm." His gaze flicked to the fire. "That'll do." Silence stretched. The girl studied him by the light. He looked carved from the mountains themselves, heavy shoulders, beard peppered with gray, eyes pale as if snow had gotten trapped inside them. He seemed as solid as the cabin, as immovable as the ridges outside, and yet his presence unsettled her almost as much as it steadied her. He rose without another word, fetched a pot, and set it on the fire. The girl watched him slice strips of dried meat, add handfuls of beans. The cabin filled with a warm earthy smell, a balm against the bitter wind pressing outside. She realized then how long it had been since she had smelled food without fear. Her stomach growled loud in the quiet. He glanced at her, one brow lifting, but said nothing. When the stew thickened, he filled 2 bowls and set one before her. The girl hesitated, eyes flicking to her mother, still unconscious. He nudged the bowl closer with a single finger. "Eat. She'll need you strong." Her throat worked, but she obeyed, scooping small spoonfuls. The warmth slid down, filling hollows she had forgotten existed. Tears threatened again, uninvited, but she swallowed them with the broth. The man ate slow, measured, like one accustomed to silence. When he finished, he leaned back, gaze fixed on the flames. The girl found herself watching him, noticing details she hadn't before. The scar crossing his left hand, the patch of threadbare shirt mended clumsily but sturdily, the wooden carving of a horse resting on a shelf above the hearth. Someone had cared to smooth its edges to shape it into something gentle. Her voice cracked the stillness. "Do you hate us, too?" His head turned, eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in the weight of the question. He studied her a long moment before speaking. "I hate men who break ribs." It was not the answer she expected. Relief loosened her chest, though fear still clung. She nodded once, holding her mother's hand tighter. The fire burned low. The storm outside thickened, snow rattling against the roof like thrown pebbles. The girl lay beside her mother, cloak drawn tight, but sleep came hard. Each creak of timber made her heart race. At some hour near midnight, she stirred awake. The fire glowed faint across the room. The man sat with his back to the wall, knife in hand, running it slow along a wet stone. The blade hissed with each pass. His face remained still, unreadable, but there was no malice in the act, only readiness. The girl watched him in secret, her chest easing with the rhythm of steel on stone. He was a sentinel, not a threat. She closed her eyes again, and for the first time since the settler's boots had struck her mother's body, she slept without flinching. Morning broke pale and cold. The cabin roof sagged under snow. Smoke rose from the chimney, curling into the gray sky. The girl woke to the smell of more stew, weaker than the night before, but warm all the same. Her mother lay still, eyes closed, but color had returned faintly to her cheeks. The man ladled food into a cup and held it toward the girl. "Try her." With shaking hands, she lifted her mother's head and pressed the broth to her lips. It spilled at first, but slowly the woman swallowed. Her lashes fluttered, eyes opening a sliver. Pain etched her features, but there was life. The girl laughed softly, almost disbelieving. She brushed her mother's cheek with trembling fingers. "See, you're safe." The woman murmured something too soft to catch. The man bent slightly, ear close. She said, "Thank you," he translated, voice gruff, but steady. The girl looked at him in surprise. "You understand," he shrugged. "Enough." His gaze lingered on the woman, something unreadable flickering in his eyes before he turned away. The day passed in quiet rhythms. He mended tools, split wood, checked snares. She tended her mother, wiped sweat, whispered words of comfort. When she tried to help with chores, he stopped her with a shake of his head. "Stay close to her." Hours stretched slow but steady. Each small act became its own language. He placed extra firewood within arm's reach. She noticed and murmured, "Thanks." He left food by her side without speaking. She met his eyes once, and though he looked away, she thought she glimpsed something gentler beneath the frost. As dusk fell, the silence was broken not by storm or wind, but by a knock at the door. The girl froze, blood draining. The man's head turned, jaw tightening. He rose without sound, rifle in hand, and moved to the door. He cracked it open, snow swirling in. A trapper stood there, shoulders dusted white, eyes shifting with unease. "Evening, Sam," he muttered. The girl caught the name and tucked it away. "Sam." The trapper's gaze flicked past him into the cabin, lingering on the girl and her mother. He shifted uncomfortably, words traveling. "Them men ain't pleased you took in company. They're drinking mean down at the settlement, saying they'll come back for her for both." The man's grip on the rifle tightened. "Let him talk." The trapper shook his head. "This ain't just talk." His eyes softened briefly on the girl. "Be ready." He turned, pulled his coat tighter, and trudged back into the snow. The man shut the door, slid the bar down, and stood still a moment, staring at the wood as if through it. The girl's voice was small. "They'll come," he turned, gaze settling on her with grim certainty. "They'll come." The fire popped, scattering sparks. Her stomach clenched with fear, but something else stirred too, relief that he had not told her a comforting lie. That night, as the wind keened against the cabin, she woke once more. The fire glowed dim, and there he sat again, this time not with a knife, but with the rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the door. For the first time, she did not see a stranger. She saw a man waiting to bleed before letting harm cross the threshold. She pulled the blanket tighter around her mother, whispered, "Well, be safe, won't we?" Her mother did not stir. Across the room, his voice came low, steady, like a promise not easily broken. "As long as I breathe." The storm raged outside. But inside, the girl felt something shift. Fear remained, but it no longer stood alone. The days that followed folded into one another, each marked by the rhythm of care and survival. Snow fell in thick curtains, burying the world in silence. The cabin became its own small country, bound by logs and firelight, ruled by the sound of shallow breathing and the scrape of wood against steel. Outside, the world hunted. Inside, life clung to fragile threads. The mother's fever came and went like tides. Sometimes her eyes opened, dark and glossy with pain, and her lips formed words in a tongue the girl understood, but the man did not. At other times she lay still as carved stone, breath faint, body sweating against the bindings that held her ribs steady. The girl sat vigil always, wiping her brow, whispering words she half believed. The man moved in quiet loops around them, his sighs filling the cabin even when he said nothing. He hunted rabbits, skinned them with clean, precise cuts. He split logs into kindling, stacking them by the fire. He repaired the roof when snow sagged it, his boots creaking overhead while the girl listened, fearful of every groan in the beams. He was constant, solid, but never explained himself. On the third day, when the mother stirred from fever and whispered broken English, she spoke her thanks. The man's head tilted, his eyes narrowing as though unused to hearing gratitude, he muttered, Don't thank me yet, and left to fetch more water. It was later, as night stretched long and the girl dozed by the fire, that fragments of the mother's story spilled free. Fever loosened her tongue, and pain carved away hesitation. She spoke of years in California when her father had come with a gold rush, believing the mountains would hand over fortune. He had died under a collapsed shaft, lungs full of dirt. She had been born into hunger. Her husband, she whispered, had been lynched in a mining town when she was still carrying the girl inside her. Too many words in his mouth, she muttered. They said he looked at a white woman too long. They said he smiled where he shouldn't. The rest needed no telling. Her voice broke and the girl laid her forehead against her mother's hand, tears burning. The man listened without seeming to. He sat in his chair with the rifle across his knees, staring at the fire, his face blank stone, but the muscles in his jaw shifted once, tight as a fist. Later still, the girl found her gaze drawn often to the carved wooden horse on the shelf. It was small, rough, but shaped with care. She lifted it once, tracing the worn edges. "Did you make this?" she asked. The man's eyes flicked to it, then away. "A long time ago." "For who?" He didn't answer. His silence told more than words might. She set the carving back gently, ashamed she had asked. But that night, when she stirred awake, she saw him at the table with it in his hands, thumb rubbing over the worn wood, his face shadowed by firelight. His grief sat heavy and private, and she did not disturb him. On the fifth morning, the storm broke enough that light spilled clear across the drifts outside. The man returned from checking his traps, shoulders dusted with snow, and spoke for the first time in hours. "Tracks." The girl stiffened. "What kind of tracks?" "Men, horses down valley." His voice was low, flat. "They're watching." Fear rose like bile in her throat. "They're coming back." He did not soften it. "Yes." The day grew sharp with tension. The girl moved quickly, feeding her mother broth, helping her sit when she could. She felt the urgency pressing into every gesture. The sense that time narrowed. Outside, the man cut branches and dragged them near, shaping crude barriers around the clearing. He sharpened stakes, set snares where the tree line thickened. The sound of his knife against wood was steady, deliberate, almost ritual. The girl tried to help, fumbling with rope and branches until her fingers ached. At last, he stopped her with a single look. "Stay with her." "But I can, you will," his voice cut through doubt, not unkind, but final. She obeyed, though shame burned hot in her chest. That night, she whispered to her mother, "He doesn't think I can do anything." Her mother's hand, trembling, brushed her hair. "He knows what you can do," she murmured. "Stay alive. That is enough." But the girl didn't want to stay alive by hiding. She wanted to fight, if only because she could not bear to watch harm fall again without standing in its path. The chance came sooner than she thought. On the seventh day, the man set the rifle on the table and spoke without looking at her. "You ever fired one?" She blinked. "No." "Then you'll learn." He lifted it, checked the chamber, and set it in her hands. The wood felt heavy, alive. She trembled under its weight. He stepped behind her, adjusting her grip. His hands were rough, scarred, but steady. He positioned her arms, shifted her stance. "Shoulder it. Lean in. Don't fight the kick. Ride it." She swallowed, nodding. He set a tin can on the stump outside, snow crusting its rim. "Aim. Slow breath. Squeeze. Don't jerk." Her heart pounded. She squinted down the sight, pulled the trigger. The blast rocked her shoulder, deafening in the cold air. The shot missed wide. He said nothing, only reset the can again. She fired until her shoulder throbbed and her ears rang. The last bullet clipped the can, knocking it sideways. She gasped, half in shock. He gave one small nod. "Better." For the first time, pride stirred in her chest. That night, she sat straighter, held her mother's hand with more resolve. She whispered, "I can do something now." Her mother smiled faintly, though pain still lined her face. "You've always been able." The days that followed carry the same rhythm. Care, training, preparation. But beneath it all grew a drumbeat of dread. Louder each day. The girl caught glimpses of figures down the slope, shadows that vanished when she blinked. Once at dusk, a horse's cry echoed from the trees, followed by laughter carried thin on the wind. The man grew sharper, movements precise, eyes always scanning. He rarely slept. His silence became heavier, and the girl understood that he carried the weight of knowing how this would end. It was on the 10th night, as the storm lifted into a brittle silence, that the mother found strength to speak again. Her eyes opened dark and deep and fixed on the man by the fire. "Why?" she asked softly. He looked at her, brow furrowing. "Why keep us? They will come for you, too." Her voice was weak, but her gaze steady. He held her eyes for a long moment. Then he said, "Because no one kept mine." The girl's breath caught. Her mother's hand tightened on hers. They did not press him for more. But when the firelight shifted, she saw the wet shine in his pale eyes, and she understood. He had lost more than he said, and it drove every step he now took. The following dawn broke sharp and cold. The girl stepped outside to fetch water, snow crunching underfoot. The sky was hard blue, the trees black against it. She bent at the stream, hands burning in the icy current when a sound pricked her ears. Hoofbeats, distant but steady. She froze, water spilling from the bucket. Shouts followed, faint but growing. Words she could not make out, but the tone was unmistakable. Men emboldened by drink and cruelty. She dropped the bucket and ran, skirts tangling, lungs searing. She burst through the cabin door, gasping. "They're coming." The man was already on his feet, rifle in hand, jaw set like stone. He moved past her, stepped outside, eyes narrowing against the glare of snow. Down the valley, dark specks moved, horses churning the drifts. The girl's heart slammed against her ribs. She clutched her mother's hand. The man's voice came low, steady. "It starts tonight." He closed the door, slid the bar across, and checked his weapons with calm precision. The girl swallowed hard, trembling, but some part of her steadied. The training, the hours of silence, the truth in his eyes. All of it had been leading to this. Her mother whispered, voice breaking. "We cannot run." "No," the man answered. "We fight." The fire snapped. Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder, closer, echoing through the frozen valley. The girl pressed her forehead against her mother's, heart torn between terror and resolve. And as the shadows of riders crested the ridge, the cabin seemed to shrink, walls closing in around three souls bound by survival. The man chambered around, gaze fixed on the door, voice colder than the storm itself. "Let them come." The sound of hoofbeats grew heavier until the ground itself seemed to thrum beneath it. Snow scattered under pounding hooves as dark shapes cut through the valley, riders leaning low, rifles slung across shoulders. The girl's breath hitched as she clutched her mother's hand tighter, every thud of horse flesh echoing in her chest like a death drum. The man stood at the door, pale eyes narrow against the window's frost. His face was stone, but his hand gripped the rifle with a certainty that steadied her. He had been waiting for this. All the silence, the sharpening, the preparation. It had been for tonight. Outside, voices rose, sharp and cruel. "Bring him out, Sam." One bellowed, laughter curling behind it. Another added, "Don't hide, mountain rat. We know what you're keeping." The girl's stomach twisted. They called him by name. They knew him. Sam eased the rifle into his shoulder and spoke without turning. "Keep her down. Keep the fire low." The girl nodded, though her hand shook as she pulled her mother deeper into the shadows. The woman's breath rattled with every motion, her eyes glistening with pain and dread. Still, she mouthed words only her daughter could hear. "Stay. Stay strong. Sam pushed the door open with his boot and stepped into the snow. The cold swallowed him whole. Breath fogging in the hard air. He walked into the clearing slow, deliberate, rifle leveled, snow swirled around his shoulders, catching in his beard, outlining him like a figure carved from ice and fury. The riders fanned out, 6 in total, horses snorting steam. Their leader sat tall, had pulled low, eyes glinting mean in the moonlight. "You've lost your damn sense, Sam," he called, voice carrying easy across the cold. "Taking in trash that ain't yours. You'll hang with em." Sam's voice came flat, steady as the mountain beneath them. "Turn back." Laughter broke from the group. One spat into the snow. "We ain't here to turn back." The leader leaned forward. "Sneer sharp. Hand her over. The China woman and the half-breed brat. Maybe we let you crawl away after." Sam didn't answer. His silence stretched long enough that the men shifted uneasily. Then his voice cracked the cold like a whip. "You'll touch neither. Not while I breathe." The first shot cracked the night. A settler fired, wild powder flashing. Sam dropped to a knee, answered with a precise blast. The man's hat spun into the snow, and his body followed a breath later. Horses shrieked, rearing. Chaos erupted. Gunfire split the air, sharp and savage. The girl flinched inside the cabin as bullets shattered wood. She pulled her mother tighter to the floor, hard hammering. Sam's rifle barked outside, steady, deliberate. She crawled to the window, fear wearing with resolve. Through the frost, she saw him move like a storm. Each shot placed with brutal efficiency, each step forward unshaken. But there were too many. They circled, flanking. One broke off, galloping toward the cabin. Panic seized her chest. She scrambled for the second rifle propped by the hearth. Her hands shook as she cocked it, memory of his instruction flooding back. "Shoulder it. Lean in. Don't fight the kick." The door shuddered under a heavy boot. She raised the rifle, breath sharp, finger tightening. The door cracked inward. She fired. The blast nearly tore her shoulder. A cry split the night outside, followed by the thud of a body in snow. Her hands trembled, ears ringing, but she held the rifle tight, refusing to drop it. Her mother's eyes, wide and wet, flickered with something fierce, pride. Outside, Sam fought on, but the tide pressed hard. A rider charged, swinging low with a pistol. Sam met him with the axe, steel biting deep, horse screaming as it stumbled sideways. Snow spattered red under moonlight. Sam turned, blood fleck, eyes wild. The leader snarled, dismounting, drawing his revolver. His face twisted with something older than cruelty. "Betrayal. You were with us once, Sam." He spat. "Thought you hated their kind, same as we did." Sam's breath steamed, chest heaving. "I hate men who break ribs." The leader raised his gun. The girl screamed a warning. Sam twisted as the shot rang, pain carving across his shoulder. He staggered, fell to one knee. The leader advanced, boots crunching snow, revolver steady. The girl's heart clenched. She fumbled to reload, fingers stiff, tears blinding. "Please," she whispered to herself. "Please don't let him fall." Sam planted his hand in the snow, rose slow, blood dripping down his sleeve. His eyes locked on the leader with a fury that burned hotter than fire. "You'll not touch them." The leader sneered. "You can't stop us." Sam lunged, closing the distance in 3 strides. They crashed into the snow, revolver firing wild into the night. They grappled, fists and fury rolling in the drifts. The leader snarled curses. Sam's teeth bared in silent rage. The girl pressed her hand to her mouth, terror choking her as the struggle blurred in blood and snow. The revolver clattered free, spinning across the ground. The leader grabbed for his knife, driving it toward Sam's chest. Sam caught his wrist, veins standing in his neck as he fought the blade back inch by inch. "Die with her then," the leader spat. The girl couldn't watch. She turned to her mother, eyes wild. The woman, pale and broken, whispered one word, voice trembling but fierce. Go. The girl seized the rifle again, staggered to the door, and shoved it open. Cold slammed into her. She raised the weapon, sight blurring through tears, the leader's back filling her vision. She remembered his instructions. Lean in. Don't fight. Squeeze. Her finger pulled. The shot cracked, echoing off the ridge. The leader jerked, body twisting, knife dropping from his hand. He fell sideways into the snow, crimson blooming across white. Sam rolled free, chest heaving, blood soaking his sleeve. His eyes snapped to her, wide with shock, then softened with something else, something she couldn't name. He nodded once, slow, then pushed himself to his feet. The remaining settlers, seeing their leader down, faltered. One cursed, yanking his reins. Another fired a final wild shot before spurring his horse into the dark. Within moments, only silence remained, broken by the ragged breath of three souls who had refused to yield. The girl lowered the rifle, hands shaking so hard it nearly slipped from her grip. Sam crossed the clearing, blood streaking his face, and took it gently from her, setting it aside. He looked at her long and searching. You saved me. Her throat closed, tears spilling unchecked. I couldn't let him. He shook his head, quieting her. You saved me. His voice carried a weight beyond gratitude, something deeper, rawer. She turned back to the cabin, to her mother propped weakly in the doorway. The woman's lips trembled into the faintest smile. Her hand lifted, beckoning her daughter back. Inside, the fire crackled warm, a fragile contrast to the blood and snow outside. Sam sank into his chair, cradling his arm, pale but unbroken. The girl knelt by her mother, pressing her forehead against her hand, sobbing with relief. For a long moment, no one spoke. The storm had passed, but its cost lay heavy in the clearing. Bodies half buried in snow, blood steaming into night. The world would not forget. Neither would they. Sam broke the silence at last, voice low, threaded with something almost like awe. Family ought to be kept safe. The girl lifted her eyes, swollen with tears, and held his gaze. In that moment she saw not a stranger, not just a savior, but a man bound now to them as tightly as blood. The firelight flickered, casting their shadows long on the walls. Outside the valley lay silent, but silence never lasted. Somewhere beyond the ridge, word would spread. Vengeance carried long in these lands. The girl knew it was not over. She knew more would come. But for tonight, her mother breathed. Sam still stood, and her own hands no longer shook with helplessness. For tonight they had survived. And as dawn began to pale the horizon, smoke rising steady from the chimney, the mountains bore witness to a bond born in blood, a vow forged in fire. The girl whispered almost to herself, "They'll never take us." Sam's eyes, pale and fierce, met hers. His answer came like stone laid on stone. "Not while I breathe."